I'm about to show you proof that the most controversial Bigfoot footage in history doesn't deserve the waves of hate it's gotten over the years, and that the evidence actually supports the idea that this footage is 100% authentic and shows real living Sasquatches.
I'm firmly convinced that he has filmed Sasquatches and that what he has portrayed in his documentaries are indeed very close portraits, in fact, of the Sasquatch face.
But even crazier than that is the mountain of unfounded lies and accusations launched at the man behind the camera, Todd Standing. Lies and accusations based on absolutely nothing substantial whatsoever, and in some cases, deliberate manipulation of the facts, as you're about to see.
Of course, I was familiar with the two faces, had always thought they were odd, but I also tried to temper my reaction by telling myself, you don't want to reject something because it doesn't look like what you expected it to look. In other words, you need to have a basis for rejection.
My name's Robert. I'm a Canadian filmmaker and researcher, and ever since having my own Sasquatch encounter in September 2024, I've been determined to learn the truth about these mysterious beings. That's why I make these videos and bring all of you along for that journey. It's also why I knew at some point I'd have to delve deeply into the infamous Todd Standing collection of Sasquatch footage. If his footage is real, it represents some of the clearest, closest, and most detailed visuals of Sasquatches in history. That's why I didn't want to mess around with any speculative theories from outside sources. I went straight to the source itself, Todd Standing. We sat down for a remote interview recently, and I launched every single skeptical question and accusation I found online directly at the man. I also consulted wildlife biologists, Ph.D. anthropologists and anatomists, and professional wildlife interpreters, all with the question of Todd's footage and its potential authenticity at the forefront. Here's what I learned.
Probably the most infamous accusation, Todd, is that the Sasquatch face in your clip, video 5, I believe, known as Jake, is actually just you in prosthetic makeup. People say this all the time. We've all seen that infamous photo online of the purported Sasquatch Jake on one side and an old photo of you on the other side, and people draw lines between the eyes of you and the eyes of Jake and the mouth and say, well, look, it kind of looks like it lines up. Clearly, this is Todd in prosthetics, Todd in makeup. So what do you have to say to that?
First of all, watch this magic trick I'll do. Are you watching this? Look at this. These are glasses I bought at a store that'll fit you. That'll fit my daughter. That'll fit most human beings. These glasses would not even come close to fitting that Sasquatch. And I prove that because they're Rocky Mountain Douglas fir needle leaves in the shot. And the needle leaves have a very specific size. And I showed this in another video. Doesn't matter whether the Douglas fir is 80 feet tall or 5 feet tall. Needle leaves are all the same size. And using that deduction, I clearly substantiated that the head of that Sasquatch, his name is Jake, when I morphed my head into it appropriately, his head wouldn't fit on the screen. It's that large.
Todd's account of using the needles visible on the trees in some of these shots as measuring tools to get a reliable estimate of the head size of these beings intrigued me. So naturally, I had to try it myself. So I've brought this still frame from Todd's video 5 into Canva here. This is the subject he calls Jake. Zooming in to this foliage in front of the subject's head, you'll notice that there's this one twig front and center that has these few small orange needles on it. This is a Rocky Mountain Douglas fir. Rocky Mountain Douglas fir trees have needles that are consistently 1 inch to 1 1/4 or at most 1.5 inches long. And that applies regardless of the tree's size, age, or location. Coniferous tree needles are remarkably consistent in length. And it's upon this consistency that we're going to build some conclusions. And to be conservative, we'll assume that these orange needles here are 1 inch long. As I said, they can be up to 1.5 inches long, but to be conservative, we'll say 1 inch. We'll get our drawing tool here, and I'm going to choose an orange pencil just because it'll show up better. And we're going to draw a line covering one of these needles from tip to bottom. This line represents exactly where that needle starts and where it stops. So this is our 1 inch measuring stick. And now we're going to clone it. make a copy of it and move that copy end to end with the first one. And now we'll do the same thing again. You can see where I'm going with this. We now have a representation of 3 inches of horizontal length, or width in this case. So we'll continue our cloning process. That's 4 inches, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, just zoom out a little bit, 13, 14, 15. 15 of these little 1-inch ticks brings us as far as we can see to the left side of Jake's head. There is no human being on the planet with a 15-inch wide skull. If you look up the average head width of an adult male human being, you're going to get figures anywhere from 6 to 7 inches. This is considerably more than double that. And again, this is unequivocally proven by the fact that these needles here are at least 1 inch long each. There's no getting around that fact. So therefore, Jake's head is at least 15 inches across. This cannot be a mask or any kind of a suit placed on the head of a human being. And furthermore, you'll notice that Jake's face in this image is not quite directly onto the camera. He's facing a little bit diagonally, which means that the apparent width that we're seeing in this still frame is actually deceptively narrow compared to the reality if he were looking at us directly front on. So one more thing to put this in perspective. I'm going to add on top of this still frame this image of a standard 12-inch ruler. And because we know that, again, these needles are 1 inch long, at a minimum, we're going to size our ruler image to match 12 of these little ticks here. We know that Jake's head is 15 needle ticks long, or wide rather, and this ruler is 12 inches long, so 3 inches extra. So this, actually it's a little bit too long still, there we go. This is a representation, a scale image of what a standard 12-inch or 1 foot long ruler would look like compared to the head of this being. By taking this selfie with me holding an identical 12-inch wooden ruler to the one I've superimposed over Jake's eyes, I'm able to very accurately scale my head compared to Jake's head, and the results are frightening. This was not a human. By the way, just before we move forward with this investigation, if you're as enthusiastic as I am about learning the truth of Sasquatch, then hit that subscribe button and notification bell. This channel is where you'll get the deepest dives, the most detailed analysis, and the most paradigm-shifting evidence that you'll find anywhere in the Sasquatch research space. I'm also launching a Patreon where you can connect with me and my Bigfoot research a whole lot more directly and intimately, and the first tier of membership is 100% free. I'll tell you more about it towards the end of this video.
Particularly interesting to me is some sign that Todd Standing interprets as Sasquatch sign, which I had reservations about when I arrived, but about which I'm changing my mind.
So now let's see if we can do a similar experiment with this still frame from video 4, the subject that Todd Standing calls Jane, the purported female Sasquatch. In this case, we have quite a good and crisp visual of the needles and foliage of a coniferous tree directly in front of her face, so we'll use that as our reference. This is an Engelmann spruce tree native to this part of British Columbia. The needles on Engelmann spruce range from 0.6 to about 1.3 inches long, so we're going to take a safe average of a 1-inch length. But as you'll see, even if we assume only 0.6 inches, the minimum length for Engelmann spruce needles, the point we're about to make still works. So we'll zoom in here and try to get a view of just one needle, and once again we'll draw a line from the tip of this needle to that little dark area that I believe is a clear representation of the twig that these needles are growing out of. And we'll take our cloned 1-inch line and zoom out so we can see the subject's face, and we'll move this over to, as best we can tell, making an educated guess, where the right side of her face is, so the left of this image. It's hard to tell because there's dead twigs and a branch in front of her face, but being conservative, I'd say this is a pretty good representation of the right side of Jane's face. Once again, we'll clone that 1-inch line and line it up with its predecessor. And then we'll repeat the process. So this is 2 inches horizontal distance, 3 inches now, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, that one moved over for some reason. 12, 13, 14. Now, I may have gone beyond her face there. Yeah, I think I have a little bit because we're getting into the dark mane of hair. So I'll remove that last one. So we'll say about 13 1-inch ticks. Now again, as with Jake, her head is not facing directly onto the camera. It's at an angle, which means that the apparent width in this image is less than it would be in real life. But this is the closest we've got because I refuse to manipulate still frames to try to get a more favorable result. This is an unaltered still frame from Todd's original footage. So we've got a minimum of a 13-inch wide head here. And again, in all likelihood, it's wider than that. As with Jake, this is far wider than any normal human head, or even abnormal human head. Just like with Jake, I'm able to take this selfie of me holding this wooden ruler and scale my head to Jane's head. And as you can see, the results are just as unsettling with Jane as they were with Jake. Okay, so I've got at this point what I feel is a fairly accurate size approximation of the heads of the creatures in Todd's clips, based again on the relative size of the Rocky Mountain Douglas fir needles visible in those clips near the heads. But the needle comparison doesn't really directly address the comparison between Todd's head and the head of the creature he calls Jake that has been floating around the internet for so many years. So next, let's look at that comparison visually under some intense logical scrutiny and see how it holds up. So we've already clearly disproven the idea that either the subject known as Jake or Jane could possibly be Todd Standing or any other human being wearing a mask or prosthetics or something. It's physically impossible. But just to put the final nail in the coffin on that idea, let's compare Todd's face to Jake's face. So we'll zoom in here on our friend Jake, and then we'll add a screenshot of Todd that I took from the very conversation we had for this video. So this is clearly an unaltered front-on view of Todd Standing. It hasn't been photoshopped. You've seen the video clips of him and I talking. It's just a plain old image of Todd. We'll remove the background on that for clarity, and then we'll start to size Todd to match Jake as closely as we can. It's just not a good match. You can see that Jake's head is way wider relative to facial features than Todd's head is. They're built completely differently. And as a reminder, this is completely discounting the fact that based on the needle length in these clips, there's no way that Jake's head is anywhere near as small as Todd's. But maybe you're still not convinced, so let's do one more experiment. We're going to compare the facial feature ratios on Todd, as far as distance of features from each other, to those of Jake. So, we'll zoom in on Todd here. Todd, if you're watching this, my apologies for the lack of dignity. Take our drawing tool, zoom in nice and close. I'm going to try to trace Todd's eyes as closely as I can, going right to the edge of the eyelids on the top and bottom, to just get a clean, accurate representation of each eye. As far as eye length and shape, that's pretty accurate. Now we'll do the other one. Now we're going to zoom out slightly, and we're going to clone one of these eye drawings. And then we're going to move that clone between Todd's eyes. And we'll put a line there just to make it visually clearer. So we're all lined up vertically. You can see it's quite obvious that the space between Todd's eyes is almost exactly one of his eye widths. And folks, with a small range of variation, this is the case for nearly every human being on the planet. Take this image of me, for instance, which I've just slapped over top of poor Todd here. Let's do the same thing. So we'll take one of these eye shapes on me, clone it, and put it between my eyes. And guess what? My eyes are exactly one eye width apart. I'm going to spare you the tedium of watching me do this on a dozen other photos of random people, but trust me, it is a repeatable process. Now, we're going to look at Jake's face again. So we'll zoom in and we'll do exactly the same thing that we did before. It's a little harder to see Jake's eyes because this is a still frame from a video, and as such a little bit blurry when we zoom in this much, but we can still see them well enough. Draw over his eye. Shade it in, and the same thing with the other eye. We'll color that in and zoom out a little bit. So there are Jake's eyes. Now we're going to clone one, just as we did with Todd, and slide it between the other two. And look at that. We have almost another entire eye width of distance. It's basically two eyes. Two eyes of space between Jake's eyes, as opposed to one eye of space on Todd's face. So there you have it. This is an open and shut case. Jake can't be Todd, not only because of the massive size of his head, based on the relative size of the needles near his head, but because his eyes are literally twice as far apart as Todd's eyes are, or as the eyes of any other normal human being on the planet. But if you're skeptical, you might still have a serious question. What about that infamous photo that we've already referenced, the one with Jake on one side and Todd's face on the other, and how when they're morphed together, they look pretty much the same? Well, let's examine that. This is a screen grab of that very image. I've cropped it so you can't see the morphing part with Jake and Todd's face, but the important thing is this image of Todd's face on its own. I realize it's very pixelated. This is the only copy I could find online, but for our purposes, this will work just fine. So we're going to try to compare Todd in this blurry image used by his critics to try to discredit him with this image of Todd from my interview. Now you can see that Todd in the blurry image is slightly looking to his left, and Todd in my screenshot is slightly looking to his right. So we're going to start by flipping the version of Todd from our conversation. Now we're going to try to size these two exactly the same so that they match. We'll use the eyes as a reference point. This shouldn't be difficult because they're literally the same guy, just some years apart. So we'll take our recent image of Todd and we'll lower the transparency so we can see the eyes of the blurry image underneath. And look at that, the eyes almost perfectly match up already. Our Todd might be a little too small. Let's make him a little bigger. And you can see the eyes of the blurry Todd and the eyes of our Todd. They now perfectly match. The eyes match, and it looks like the nose and mouth are a pretty good match too. So let's zoom out a bit, and we'll restore full opacity to the recent Todd here. Do you notice any problems here? Let me show you that again. Transparent, opaque. Transparent, opaque. The eyes, nose, and mouth all match up on both images. They're almost identical. But look at Todd's head in the older blurry image. It's way fatter, taller, and much wider than this recent version of Todd. His ears are clearly visible in the old and blurry image compared to the more recent one. Everything about his head in the blurry image is wider and fatter than this recent, unaltered image from this very conversation that I had with Todd. So what does this tell us? Well, it's pretty clear. This image of Todd from my conversation is real and unaltered. This image of Todd was deliberately morphed and warped in Photoshop to try to prove the point that Todd is Jake, but he isn't.
I really always found it laughable and preposterous since the proportions completely don't match. What they're doing is they're stretching my head and elongating the Sasquatches.
Everyone was always doing all the morphing between Todd's face and the faces of these things.
Photoshop, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what a morphing app does, is it takes two very different A's and B's or A's and D's, and it morphs it smoothly between the two, across the space between the two. And someone had done it with Barack Obama and the Hoth or the Ewok face, And they morphed perfectly in the same fashion. That's how a morphing works. Now, if you do facial recognition, I guess, and can show that the landmarks of the face align to a greater degree than would be expected for two different individuals, then that would be a different case. But morphine, that's not.
Well, it's deliberate manipulation.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly.
Well, that settles it beyond any logical shadow of a doubt. Whatever these creatures are, they absolutely are not Todd or any other human being in a mask or makeup. They can't be. It's physically impossible. But as compelling as these conclusions are, they're not enough alone to silence Todd's critics.
People have pointed out that Jake seems to have hair going right up to the cheeks and obviously a fairly uniform, thick coating of hair around the forehead going up into the sagittal crest.
Right.
Whereas Jane seems to have a fairly bushy, almost mane of fur around the head, they say, and then much shorter fur or almost no fur or hair around the
Yeah.
face. So there's a perceived difference there, and people think,
Right.
well, if these are supposed to be the same species, what gives? They look different. So, what are your thoughts and responses on that?
If you put me beside my Ashley, you would think we're almost not even the same species. I have a beard. I have what you just said. I have the hair that comes up. She doesn't. Like what you're seeing with Jane too is a mane. It's that bright sunlight hitting on the skin, and then really creating like a separation look where it looks almost like a mane. But she has all the little hairs on her face, like I've seen Sasquatch do. And if you actually, that's been perplexing to me because they actually have the same eye spacing. They match if you put them on each other. They match with the eye spacing. Their nose looks the same. Their lips are pretty much, they're so similar. So I see extreme similarities. The only difference is, again, you're talking male and female, there's serious sexual dimorphism. So the males are much larger than the females. So you're going to get beard, you're going to get excessive hair. Males are excessively hairy. And then of course, conditions. My God, I had cloud cover for Jake. Cloud cover, Robert, as opposed to direct sunlight in the shadows of the trees. That's going to create such a different skin look, skin pigmentation. You know, you're seeing way more details on Jake because I'm getting much more clarity because I'm not getting overexposed with the light.
So Todd's definitely not wrong about serious physiological differences existing within the same species. Hairline variation is very common across individuals in various species. Among gorillas and chimpanzees, for instance, and even more so humans, hair growth patterns vary significantly due to age, sex, genetics. There's a lot of variation. The claim that one subject is, quote, a more advanced mask ignores the possibility that two individuals of the same species might naturally vary. Dr. Meldrum states, quote, there are variations between the subjects shown, but that doesn't invalidate their potential authenticity. They could simply be different individuals.
I think those two are like brother and sister. Like they look so absolutely similar. Hair is just messy one day and maybe a little less messy. Maybe she got recently groomed. Like, I don't know. I actually see the opposite. Especially when you look at their bodies, that's what you're missing too, is the bodies. It's the same physiology. Like I can see it's the same species. They're upright, bipedal, very muscular. You know, Jane is very patty looking, and Jake is not. He's absolutely enormous, tremendously muscular. And that's something that we don't know about. You can see it actually in my video too, where that Sasquatch stands up. He's absolutely freaking enormous. Like I know people aren't there and they don't understand. I've shown how big that Sasquatch is, but man, he was so incredibly muscular. It just doesn't show up on film whatsoever. You lose that size proportion over when you get footage, and especially in the mountains. But yeah, so much more massive. Again, look at orangutan males and females. Wow, right? Like orangutans have pads that stick out as opposed to the females. So there's not that kind of difference. There's much less difference, significantly less difference in the Sasquatch males and females as there are in orangutans. That's the differences in the male and female Sasquatch. And Kubota, he seems to have darker skin. I actually agree with that. He really has darker skin.
I got up there, and then he shows out and unveils this blackness, the dead, like he calls it, the devil. In response, I'm thinking to myself, well, this looks more like I might have expected. I mean, it had this black face.
He's got the same exact jaw, the same hair. Actually, he has a receding hairline.
Very apish, chimpanzee-like face with a very receded hairline, heavy brows. There were moles and bumps on, creases across the forehead, and
Very wide set eyes, as I recall, as well.
And they blinked with a very normal look to them. It had a big, broad, downturned nose that was kind of pressed down, had a oblique scar across the nose.
And we see that in chimpanzees as well. They have receding, so Kubota is smaller, not nearly as muscular.
You could still make an argument that although these beings certainly aren't Todd or any other human in a mask, they could be animatronic props, some sort of roboticized fake creatures designed to move convincingly and create the illusion of living beings. In fact, that's more or less what the authors of this PDF that I found online have said. This document is entitled A Critical Examination of the Todd Standing Sylvanic Subjects. And it wasn't just written by regular Joes either. One of the authors is Daniel Faulkner, a Weta Hollywood special effects artist. The other is Phil Poling, a former police officer and paranormal investigator. So let's examine their claims about Todd's work point by point and see how they stack up against logic.
Someone had published, it was David Faulkner. He and this other fellow wrote up a evaluation. And they went through, to the credit, they went through and isolated anatomical features or observations of morphology and then critiqued it. But some of the critiques, as I read through it, and I sat there and read through it and typed up my own little response to some of their criticisms and threw onto the page exemplary illustrations, figures, just glommed from the internet that refuted the assertion they were making.
So the first point made in this document has to do with the eyelid and eye movement. The claim is that the eyes in video 4, the creature known as Jane, don't move, don't blink, and don't dilate. And this is suggestive, according to the authors, of a static prop with taxidermy glass eyes rather than real eyes on a real creature. But here's the thing. Eye immobility is not proof of a hoax. Wild primates often fix their gaze or avoid making eye contact, especially when they're under a perceived threat. And this has been noted by primatologist Jane Goodall, who observed it in chimpanzee behavior and said, quote, direct eye contact can be perceived as a threat. Now, according to Todd Standing, the creatures he filmed here knew that he was there, so this eye behavior actually makes sense from a primatological perspective.
She's not bobbing her head around and she's not ripping around with her eyes. She's looking for me. She's very intently. If you ever see a deer looking for a wolf, they freeze up and they stare. She knows I'm down there and she thinks she's got me dialed in. She's looking in the right spot. So she's down there and she's staring at me. So that's why you don't see blinking and whipping around. A deer doesn't do that when it's dialed in. A bear doesn't do that when it's dialed in on something it's looking at. Animals don't do that. I was never able to film her for more than about maybe 30 seconds because I got in there through a snowstorm. That's the only way I got into this particular area. There was a snowstorm where I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Well, how did you find your way? I followed the creeks. I was right off a creek. Even I followed creeks and I followed rocks to get to this particular spot. So now after the snowstorm, day after, this is where I'm getting the footage, I'm under a giant tree, a big, huge Douglas fir. And it's hot. It's actually warm out. The temperature has gone up like 25 degrees, like it can in the fall. And the snow is melting badly. And you can see that. There's snow around Jane. You see snow melting around her too. So as the snow melts, it's splattering down on my camera. So I'm switching from one camera to another. I have a crappy still camera and I have my video camera that I'm really good with. So I took the camera down, wiped the lens on it, used the other camera. Like I'm just kind of in a mode to really get things done and be very focused. So that's the reason that the shots are shorter. That's the reason she's looking like that.
It's also worth noting that although critics cite the lack of pupils in Jane's eyes as another sign of fake glass eyes, pupils actually are clearly visible at certain points in the footage. The next claim has to do with the lip edge, mouth shape, and nasal seams on these purported creatures. Firstly, the authors claim that the lips of the creature called Jane look like painted latex. and a line beneath the nose is called a seam, suggesting mask construction. But latex-like appearance can also result from dry, cracked skin, which is very common in cold weather. By this logic, my lips turn into latex every winter. Also, natural scars, wrinkles, genetic anomalies, or folds can all create lines that resemble seams beneath noses. The authors claim that humans never have this feature, but this is demonstrably false.
They made a big deal about this, the dark line, which they were convinced indicated a seam where the appliance, the nose appliance as a whole, was poorly applied and no touch-up makeup had been used to hide that seam. So I just got in and just regular portraiture and figures of people, photos rather, of people just off the street, models, whatever, humans. And example after, I must have had a half a dozen or a dozen examples that looked identical to what was on what I call the pasty face. There's the Ewok looking one and the pasty face.
Yeah, I think Todd calls that one Jane.
Jane, yeah.
Yeah.
Jane looks like she has too much foundation on her. It's all dimply and pasty and hasn't been smoothed out. Anyway, I think it was her nose that they were drawing attention to. They also drew attention to one of the corners of one of their eyes. And they said, it doesn't have the proper little nictitating membrane in the corner of the eye, the little caruncle. And again, so I found there was a picture of a young orangutan whose little button eyes looked identical to what was on the figure. And I said, okay, so is this orangutan fake? I mean, the point is, look, I made sure, and I went down. There was one after another, like that. And I said, look, do not take this summary as an endorsement. This is wholly a critique of your critique. And my point is simply, if you're going to reject these faces on this basis, then you have to respond to my critique. I mean, that this is the worst ammunition or the best ammunition you've got. It comes up wanting, It doesn't tip the scale. It may provide some superficial reinforcement into your opinion, but if someone can so easily, without hardly any effort, I found these contradictory images. What does that say?
Why are we only seeing the faces in those shots? Didn't they move their bodies? Why wasn't the camera panning down to show physiological movement beyond just the face? Why don't we have those body visuals?
First of all, it's because it's what people focus on. They always seem to want more. It just never seems to be enough, because you know what actually happened, Robert, is video 2 and video 3 were first. And you know what everybody said to me? How come all we see is body? How come we don't see any face? Video 2 is a Sasquatch standing up from behind and squatting back down. And video 3 is a Sasquatch running away from me. So people for years, how come we don't see a face? How come we got no face? Then I give them a face, and what do they say? How come we don't see the body? How come and it's like, which way do you want me to go? I gave you a body already. That was when I first started. Then you complain you want a face. Like, maybe you should go into your history a little bit. I'm just zoomed in on the spot. Believe me, there are shots that I took where I'm looking, but they're peering through different spots. I'm literally like 5 or 6 layers of trees back. I was damn lucky to get whatever I got. Like, I'm zooming in on that as much as I can, 100% zoom, no digital, just optical zoom. And I'm giving you everything there is. If you look, there is no lower body shot because it's behind trees, behind rocks. Jane's putting her head out, looking down below. When you put your head out as a sniper to go look at something, are you going to put your body up? Why? And that's all you can see of her. She's in a really good position. She's in like an indented ground. There's, I think it was a former waterfall spot where she just got in that gully. She pops her head up. She's moving back along the trench, looking up. And Jake, believe me, I wanted more. That was the whole incident behind what happened with Jake. Is I'm taking a shot, and this is in my mind. I'm zoomed in. This is a brilliant shot in perfect crystal clarity. I get it for like maybe 8 seconds. I turn the record off and I turn the power off, and I get down into my ghillie cloak and I move closer. So I got the shot. There's nothing better than this. I got the shot. Can I get better? Yes. And that's why you see progressively I'm moving closer and closer and closer until finally I stood up out of my ghillie cloak and went right after him to get the shot, in which case, obviously, I did not succeed. But that's the progression of what was transpiring. It's me getting in closer and closer, knowing that I have limited battery in my camera and limited space for recordings to happen.
So when Todd presents himself as the kind of guy capable of hiking dozens or even hundreds of miles into the backcountry and gathering convincing Sasquatch evidence and even sightings, it turns out you don't have to take his word for it, because he's guided hundreds of people over the years into these areas who have seen the evidence and even seen the creatures. One of those people is Dr. Jeff Meldrum.
So we were finding tracks, and quite dispersed in some instances, that measured about 13 and a half inches. So not huge, but that was bigger than even Todd, who's he's probably about 6'5", 6'6" at least. It was bigger than his booted foot, bigger than mine, and heavy, deeply impressed till the moss was crunched and did not rebound. Our footprints, when we walked through a spot, would tend to kind of recoil like memory foam. We'd stay up late around the fire, and it was on one of those occasions that something approached the camp. And everyone was accounted for. There were no extra vehicles coming up. We were there from late afternoon until the wee hours of the night, and then something approached camp, and that's when I caught a glimpse, something through the night vision. And we were hearing some vocalizations, some whistling, kind of chirping, almost avian sort of vocalizations, and then branches breaking.
Okay, so we've settled that the beings in Todd's footage cannot be Todd or any other human being in a mask or makeup. And the case for them being some other form of fakery, like animatronics or CGI, is at best circumstantial and subjective. So what are Todd's critics to do? Well, it turns out the next move in their arsenal is to attack Todd personally with lies.
This event that apparently included someone seeing you and your vehicle and a pair of gorilla gloves and or an entire ape costume, and you essentially, according to this person, tried to brush it off. It isn't that convenient, but what would be your response to someone who came across that accusation online, didn't know what to think about it?
Yeah, it was Solo Phil was with me. I did a little expedition with him and his girlfriend, and I think it was his girlfriend saw the glove just on my back seat. It was one. What happened was so my brother-in-law has my nephew, just love him to death. He was a gorilla for Halloween. So after the Halloween costume was in, and the gorilla glove on him was big, but fit my hand quite tightly. And he thought, he gave them, he said, well, as I do winter work on my vehicle, I go to wipe the snow off. I never use gloves. He says, well, maybe if they were Bigfoot-like gloves, you'd use them. So just as a joke, I put they're gorilla gloves, and they're really tight on my hand, like for a little kid, right? And I've never filmed a little Sasquatch hand, like the hands that are in my documentary. This is way after my documentary was out too. Since that actually happened, he saw that gorilla glove. And again, one cracked because I actually tried to use it. They break in the winter. And I just threw it in the back seat and I just forgot about it because I'm a really messy guy. What he didn't tell you, it was like underneath the freaking tire chains. She had to move tire chains, all this crap. It was a pile of junk and garbage on it. When they pulled it out, it was a crushed mess of a stupid little kid's gorilla glove. He's like, what's this? I go, well, it's just that my nephew's, right? It's no big deal. So I've never filmed a little Sasquatch hand. And my footage was already out at that time, and that's clearly not this is like a fake looking gorilla hand glove. So it's funny how just the littlest things, if that's the best you got, right? Of course I do Halloween. I love Halloween. I celebrate it. My nephew was a gorilla for Halloween, not a Sasquatch, once. And that comes back like this on me. So, it is what it is. It doesn't take anything away from the work.
But then, talking to the wife, I said, so what is it with all these stories about you being in the costume industry in Hollywood? She goes, costume industry? She said, I did makeups for proms and makeovers rather, for proms and weddings on the side as a side hustle, because I had some cosmetology training, had worked in a salon for a while, So I was just doing this as a side hustle when we were kind of pinching pennies. That made so much more sense than what, and his pseudonyms. Well, because he told me, he said, as soon as word got out that, I was doing some side jobs here in between going out in the field by creating little commercials and things for local entrepreneurs and businesses. But when word got out that I was the Bigfoot guy, they stopped calling me. So I reposted and re-advertised with the pseudonym.
Do you have any response to this accusation of a family connection with a costume professional?
Yeah, they've really pushed that with my sister being a special effects makeup artist, which is a preposterous lie. She's never had anything to do with that. She made a nice Halloween costume of a mummy on herself. You go to the store and you buy that pre-made mummy thing. She did a really good job with that. She's pretty artistic when it comes to doing stuff around the house, but she's never worked in the special effects. I mean, it's preposterous allegations, complete and utter lie. There's absolutely no, like, my sister has never worked or done anything or trained in any way in special effects makeup. I have never had a family member that ever had any training or any work in special effects makeup ever. It's never happened. It's a preposterous lie. One of the gentlemen that was propagating this lie, I was at a conference, a Sasquatch conference, and I went up to him and I said, well, I'd like to talk to you about this. I said, do you have a sister? He goes, yeah. Do you love her? Uh-huh. Do you know her really well? Uh-huh. She's a special effects makeup artist. And he looks kind of, he goes, no, she's not. And I go, yes, she is. Yes, she is. Yes, she is. That's the evidence that people have. They just go around going, yes, she is. And I don't want to talk about it anymore because he's a proven hoaxer. We do need to talk about it because even my sister has allegedly been on shows in the U.S. We heard it. My sister showed me. Hey, Todd, look, I'm on a show, the special effects makeup artist. She had a southern accent. We're from Canada. Some lady from Tennessee. I'm Todd Standing. I am a special. It was a complete and utter lie.
Okay, so are any of the defenses against these accusations that Todd has shared here provable? I would say no. But here's the thing. Logically speaking, it's very difficult to prove a negative. It's a lot easier, for example, to prove through documents, photos, videos, whatever, that someone's sister was a Hollywood special effects expert than to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was not. And don't forget, we have the clearly demonstrable proof to fall back on that the beings in Todd's clips could not possibly have been Todd in makeup or a mask, or any other human being. That is provable beyond a shadow of a doubt.
The species is real. I really did film them, and the discovery is moving forward very successfully, and I'm very happy about it.
But even more powerful than that, in my mind, is the fact that when I listen to Todd react and defend himself against these personal accusations to do with him and his family, I believe the guy. He genuinely comes across not as a liar, but as someone who's honestly fed up with years and years of accusations, of fakery, of dishonesty, just because he's brought something very paradigm shifting to the public eye. It's pretty clear in the Bigfoot community that it's become very fashionable to bash Todd Standing, to launch all sorts of accusations against him, or more accurately, to repeat the accusations launched by others without any actual proof or knowledge of the nuances involved. Maybe you're even guilty of this yourself. But also, and I really can't emphasize this enough, not liking Todd Standing is not a logical basis to accuse him of lying or hoaxery.
When there were reports done on me, I looked these people's names up, and guess what? No even attempt to have a discussion with me. And I don't care how special effects you are, how Ph.D. you are. If you didn't ever even attempt to interview a perfectly willing subject, from the only witness that was there, you are incompetent and you are a coward. Robert, you can even speak to that. I mean, how have I been with you? You've interacted with me, you've spoken with me. This is how I am with people. Robert's asked me for footage. Robert's asking me for stuff. And here I am doing the show, giving him everything I can, fearlessly. And that's what you can expect from a man who's absolutely devoted to and telling the truth. And I'm very passionate about this discovery process. If you're pure enough to really be looking for the truth and you're focused on the truth, you find it. And that's what I tell my expeditioners before they come out. Don't worry about Bigfoot. Focus on discovering the truth. Come out here and find out what the truth is, and the truth will set you free.
So there you have it. Quite a compelling and ultimately airtight case for the authenticity of Todd Standing's well-known Sasquatch footage. So what do you think? Have I convinced you that this is the real deal, or do you still remain completely skeptical? Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please do share. If you've ever wanted to be part of this search for the truth about Bigfoot, not just watching from the sidelines, but actually standing with me as I dig deeper, then I've just launched something just for you. My new Patreon is live, and it's built like a research team. You can sign up for free and still get access to behind-the-scenes photos and occasional polls. Those are open to everyone. But if you want to go further, sign up as a research supporter. For $5 a month, you'll get early access to ad-free versions of all my videos, exclusive behind-the-scenes photos, and exclusive polls. At the research participant level, $10 a month will get you all of that, plus behind-the-scenes videos, 10% off all exclusive Cabin in the Woods merch, full-length extended interviews, and voting power for upcoming video projects. To celebrate the launch, the first 100 members to sign up will get 20% off their first purchase of exclusive Cabin in the Woods merch. That's on top of the discounted prices already going on in the store right now. Those discounts are worth more than even the highest tier of paid membership. This really is the best way to support this work, get closer to true Bigfoot investigation, and help me keep pushing for answers. All links are in the description. I hope to see you on the inside. As always, thanks so much for watching this video. Please give it a like, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to Cabin in the Woods, and I'll see you all in the next video.